Bright Duty. Every student matters.
So with that, we move on to the last topic, and this topic is called Reconstructing History from Oral Testimonies. So until now, we learned about all the events that led to partition, and we also saw its grave impact on the people, right? So now we'll try to understand how the experiences of people help us or provides us great source for history, for reconstructing the history of partition. Okay, so now oral narratives, memoirs, people who have written, people who have pictures, the diaries, the family historians who have written down or who knows everything by heart, their accounts, all these are very important sources, okay, for reconstructing, for understanding the history of an event like partition, okay. So these are sources that helps us understand the condition of ordinary people during the partition. So it's very important point. These are important because they gives us a window to understand the actual experiences of the people when an event such as partition took place. We know what the government did. We know all the rules and regulations. We know all the missions, all the plans. We know everything, right? But what about the people? So the people's experience can be understood when we look at the pictures, when we listen to them, when we listen to the interviews, when we read their diaries, when we look at, say, for example, certain materials which they carried from Lahore to Delhi. So all those things helps us better understand the condition of ordinary people during the partition. Okay. We already know that partition was one of the gravest events in the history of India, and it altered the lives of thousands of people, not only in 1948, but in 1949, and then years beyond that. Okay. So partition should not be understood simply as a political event, but through the meaning attached to it by those who lived it. So the oral testimonies, the oral source, what does it tell us? It tells us that events like partition should not be just understood from the political perspective of the government. Okay? It should not be understood as a political event. Okay? But it should be understood through the meanings attached to it by those who lived through it. Okay? Meaning the experience of the people, how they walked from how they migrated from, say, for example, East Pakistan to, from East Punjab to West Punjab, from West Punjab to East Punjab, from West Bengal to East Bengal. So all those narratives, their challenges, their sufferings, they help us to understand or give meaning to the history of partition. Alright? So personal experiences of the people, their stories, their interviews, the objects which they have carried through that period helps the historians to write accounts, very clear accounts of what had happened to the people during such an event. Okay, what actually happened to people, the people's experience, the people's stories get documented. Okay, and we have to understand that when you look at the government letters, government registered, government files, we do not get this kind of information. We do not get information of how the people experienced, what they felt, whether they felt sad, whether they were angry, whether they wanted to kill themselves, whether they wanted to survive. All those only come from the oral sources. Okay. And the government records, they do not give information about the day-to-day experiences of the people and how the government's decision to divide the country affected them. The government letters and records and documents, they do not tell us. But it is the people's experience that tell us, okay, how they were impacted by the government's decision to partition Punjab, to partition Bengal, alright? So the oral history allows historians and scholars to highlight the experience of the poor, powerless, men, women, basically those people whose existence had been ignored and who had been taken for granted. Okay, so people's voice, which do not generally get written on the history books, which do not generally get documented, those get documented and written by looking at the oral sources. All right. But we must also understand that although oral sources are important and they allow us to learn about the people's experience, which the official government documents do not allow us, but we also have to understand that it has a drawback. The oral sources, the narratives, the diaries, the photographs, they do not tell us everything about the event. Okay, they tell us about some aspects which we do not get from other sources of history. Okay, so what we have to do when we use oral sources to understand an event such as partition is that we corroborate from other sources. Like we bring the oral sources and we put it together with the government records, with other sources, and then we look at all of it together to then bring out a story which will cover all aspects or most of the aspects of that event. Okay, so that is the only drawback.